Some players go through adversity before achieving their greatest successes. Others have to face everything to achieve the minimum. Now imagine being a player, out of the blue waking up with an unbearable pain in your eyes. You realize that everything is blurry. You rush to the hospital. The doctors tell you that you urgently need surgery or else you'll go completely blind. What would you do? I really have no way of knowing, but Edgar Davids faced everything. The world, his problem, his opponents, Ajax refusals, to get on the list of the best players in history. Yes, he played too much for all the clubs he played for. I can't remember a single game where I wasn't in a lot of pain. It was difficult, but when the coach called me, there I was, getting ready to come on, he said in an interview. Edgar Davids is undoubtedly one of the greatest players in history. Born in Suriname, he is best known as a former midfielder for the Netherlands, with a gigantic brute strength and intelligence that few had. All this made him one of the best of his time. When he arrived in the midfield of any team in the world, he quickly gave the team a dynamic and changed it completely. A combative defensive midfielder with the flair and personality of a number 10, Davids represented some of Europe's biggest clubs and won everything a club could win. He was always a standout player on the pitch. He had the ability to make everything look simple and easy. Despite being a defensive midfielder by nature, Davids had that aura that caused fear in opponents. He was a train with legs, creative, expressive, and a joy to watch, even reminiscent of Ronaldinho Gaucho. Speaking of Brazilians, a Dutch newspaper even asked him if he was sure he wasn't Brazilian. Such was his technique. And that was unusual. Obviously, nobody believed their eyes. He was one of the toughest players you could face in the 90s and 2000s. With infinite stamina, no matter what happened, he would keep running after you, biting your ankles until he got what he wanted. Hence his nickname, Pitbull. Edgar's story is impressive, full of twists and turns and great achievements. He had to risk everything for a second eye operation, and even then he never thought of giving up. He had to wear glasses that fogged up the moment he started to sweat. And there Davids was, without complaint. He broke his legs twice. He recovered without looking back. He was banned from the national team in the middle of the biggest racism scandal in the country's history. He overcame it in the best possible way, with his head held high and proud of who he was. Sabotaged by the medical staff and banned for doping, he didn't even worry because he was aware of his innocence. He lost 3 Champions League finals, 2 of them on penalties and 1 allegedly stolen, and nothing stopped him because he really was used to having the odds stacked against him. Long before the glasses and dreadlocks, Davids was turned down 3 times by the Ajax youth team, so he really was used to it. But once he was in, he didn't allow himself to miss out. He stood out so much at youth level that he quickly became a regular in the first team. A few years later, he and his teammates ushered in a new era in the Netherlands, a golden age in Dutch soccer. They weren't just top of the league, they were on their way to a Champions League title. That's right, that's what happened to him and that legendary team. Edgar and Seedorf were the main stars. The team played beautifully. That's why there was a story in the media at the time that those players could only be Brazilian, since Ajax were technically enviable. When they won the Champions League, defender Blind said that the title was dedicated to Suriname. The Dutch didn't like that. Although he was born in the American country, he was a naturalized Dutchman and had to respect his new country. At least that's what the media said at the time, and the fans bought into the argument. But Seedorf and Davids, also Surinamese, stood by their colleague. If in 1995, Davids was one of the most important players in 1996. With the departure of Seedorf and Rijkaard, he became the backbone of that team, which refused to play ugly. What he played that year was outstanding. They reached their 2nd Champions League final in a row, but Davids lost on penalties. Yes, he missed, and the fans were furious with him. After all, it would have been a great opportunity for the team to emerge even more powerful. But a scandal would come to light. Blood tests of many Juventus players were off the charts. They were allegedly doping themselves in order to perform better in the match. Even so, the fans were unforgiving. Ajax lost that Champions League. Obviously, after such a good year, with the exception of the Champions League final, Davids was called up for Euro 1996. Guus Hiddink was the coach of the Oranges. However, it's important to say that both Davids and the other Surinamese players were called up right before the Euros. The coach didn't seem to like them very much and hardly ever gave them a chance. So much so that Davids himself, who at the time was already the best in his position, only got 10 minutes in the Euro qualifiers. As a result, a scandal involving black and white players came to the fore. Many of that glorious generation of Dutch footballers had actually been born in Suriname and, of course, loved the Netherlands as much as their country of origin. In the first game, Seedorf and Edgar were deployed in midfield, but the Netherlands only came away with a goalless draw against Scotland. But after the game, the coach said, Seedorf and Davids need to play less with their hearts and more with their heads. Seedorf replied, I disagree. We're not stupid players. In the next game, Guus withdrew only Davids. But in the 26th minute, after a yellow card, the coach took Seedorf off the pitch and sent him to the bench. The player went crazy with rage, sat down next to Edgar, and they started talking badly about his coach. At least that's what Guus Hiddink thought. Asked about the coach's choices, Edgar Davids said, he should stop licking the white players and pay more attention to the team. Then it was on. The team's locker room was filled with confusion and fighting. Some players disagreed with Davids, including black players. But the fact is that after that, there was no way the Netherlands could continue in the Euros. Davids was dismissed from the national team. The discussion didn't end, however, as the feud even spread to Ajax. Basically, the team's white players were paid more than the black players. To give you an idea, Frank and Ronald de Boer were paid around 500,000 euros each, while Davids received just 100,000 and Seedorf 80,000, all of whom were stars of that epic Ajax team. After all that, there was no longer any room for the star in Dutch soccer. With 15 titles to his name and just 24 years old, Milan rushed to sign him. He probably played the best game of his life. President Agnelli said, "That was the most beautiful action I've ever seen from a player." Records were being broken, moves worthy of a star player. Everything was going too well at the 1998 World Cup. When the ball rolled, he played a lot, even rivaling Ronaldo for the Best Player award. He crossed, tackled, passed, broke up opponents, and nobody could stop him. In the knockout rounds, he scored against Slavia in a 2-1 win. In the quarterfinals against Argentina, he almost scored an anthological goal when he came out of midfield but couldn't finish. Nevertheless, the Netherlands went through. In the semifinals, the Oranje would play the Amarelinha. The player wouldn't let Ronaldo down. He was always on his toes. The game ended 1-1, and Brazil won on penalties. Edgar lost another final on penalties. Even so, he played superbly, and everyone was already saying that he was going to be the best player in the world. But this story is full of twists and turns. Remember? Yes, they missed the chance to go through to the Champions League final on penalties. Again. Made worse by the fact that their team somehow missed another 2 penalties during the match. And that wasn't even the worst of it. One day he woke up, but his head hurt a lot. His vision was blurred, and as the day went on, it only got worse. He went to the hospital and discovered that he had glaucoma. When he heard that, it was perhaps his only moment to rethink his career. Because after that, how would he play? After all, he would lose his sight almost completely. He didn't know what to do. Every day they said he would retire. But at that moment, he did what he was used to doing, surprising everyone. He refused to give up. He discovered that he could play with glasses, and so he did. He put on his new must-have and charmed Europe once again. Edgar was so absurd that he never complained about his glasses as a reason for his performance, even though everyone knew they fogged up. Even though everyone knew that no matter how much he wore his glasses, he still couldn't see fully. It was noticeable. But he refused to say anything against it. Do you know why? Precisely because he was a ball player. That's why he was a legend. He didn't care about his glasses, his injuries. He just saw what he wanted and chased it until he got it. So when you see this guy, know he was one of the greatest monsters the world has ever seen. He deserves a lot of respect. The following season, Lippi was sacked. They lost the league and were quickly eliminated from the UEFA Cup. The other season, Zidane left. Even so, David seemed focused on once again ensuring that the fans barely noticed that Zidane had gone. However, he succeeded, bringing back the league title after 4 years, even quashing rumors of a possible departure to Manchester United or Arsenal. As soon as the season came to an end, the news came out. Davids had tested positive for doping, and I know what you're thinking. Ironic, isn't it? I would never dope. I'm very careful with my body. I don't eat chocolate, I don't drink. Why would I dope? Some of Juve's players even revealed that the team doctors treated any ailments in their players with strong vitamins. This became so clear that one of the team doctors was sacked. Edgar's punishment of 16 months was reduced to just 4 months. With that, you can draw your own conclusions about what might actually still be going on at Juventus. Edgar was afraid of missing out on the World Cup, but the worry was all for nothing. Without him, the Dutch team didn't even qualify. After 30, everyone expected him to lose his rhythm, but he refused. He played too much and was once again in the Champions League final. This time against AC Milan, his beloved teammate Seedorf. David played too much, and everyone said he was the best. But in the end, Seedorf lifted another Champions League title, becoming the first player to win 3 Champions League titles for 3 different teams. It seemed to haunt him. He played too much for the clubs he played for, but when he got to the final, the ball wouldn't go in. In any case, Juventus were beginning a process of reconstruction, not just on the pitch, but in politics too. After the doping scandals, Edgar went on loan to Barcelona. And who was the coach? Frank Rijkaard, his former teammate at Ajax. At the time, Barcelona had just signed Ronaldinho. David played like few others. Barcelona went 15 games without losing, but he had to return to Juve and soon moved to Inter Milan, with one goal to win a Champions League. However, the team's main sponsor was Pirelli. And what does this have to do with the story of our star player? Simple. He started hitting on the wife of the company's CEO. Yes, he did. In other words, he didn't last long with the team and moved to Tottenham. In the English team, he returned to his high performance and managed to play some very good games. Further away than he had once been, he played for Ajax again and other small clubs in England, retiring in 2014. If ever there was a footballer who defined the phrase, "The streets will remember," that someone was Edgar Davids, a legend of our world soccer.